Hey, let's talk to Baroness Claire Fox, independent peer and director, of course, of the Academy of Ideas. Claire, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
You'll remember the 70s. I don't wish to age you, but I mean, it's beginning to look a bit like that up in Birmingham, isn't it?
Yeah, different reasons, but absolutely horrible what's happening in Birmingham.
Yeah, I mean...
I think it's really funny this morning because a government minister, the local government minister, said, this strike must end. It's like, what? You make it... Is that it?
Yes.
Is that your declaration?
Right.
I mean, it's like something you have to do something. You can't just like announce it. Everybody knows it should end.
Right. And probably even both sides of it want it to end, but they can't find any agreement about how to end it.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a genuine emergency. And at this point, I do think the government should step in, not just make an announcement. And at the very least, they should, as has just been suggested, they should organise an emergency for Birmingham, recruit all of those not in education or training people, give them some dosh for a while and say, go and clean up Birmingham.
Yeah. I think that's a very good idea, because let's talk about that story, because I mean a lot of people are losing their well, I can't say the word, can I, but they're losing whatever it is they've got over the tariff story, and I'm less concerned about the tariff story than I am about our own economy and how it's being stewarded by this government, you know, because we'll ride the wave of the tariffs. I'm sure it'll all work out in the end, and whether or not, you know, the stock market recovers, you know, the guys that work at the stock market will be still making a fortune and buying a new Ferrari in the new year, you know, so I'm less worried about that than I am about this wasted generation. Story in the front of the Times. We've been talking about it, a lot of people talking about it on the show this morning, how hard it is to get a job, how easy it should be. People should just get out there and work. But 500,000 people in this country, young people who have never actually had a job.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got to remember what the causes of this are. We can't get away with not saying lockdown. I mean, this is a generation that went through lockdown that were demobilised. And we broke a social contract with that lockdown because we basically said work wasn't that important.
Yeah.
It's, you know, health is more important, right? That was the message.
Yes, it was.
That's what we told them. And so consequently, you've got this generation of young people who think, I don't feel so well, I'm not going to go to work. You know, I don't feel well enough to go to work. Yeah. And they got out of that habit was broken. And I think that's a very big factor. The other problem is that we have medicalised far too many conditions. So this generation has been brought up being told that any number of things are mental ill health. You know, that if they're feeling miserable, they're feeling fed up, that they are actually ill. There's huge queues for diagnosis for mental health illness and for things like ADHD. They feel as that, in other words, I want us to recognise it's not just lazy young people, it's sort of our generation's fault for having introduced all this nonsense to them in the first place. They just haven't got the resilience. So we've got to really see this as I think, this is a genuine national crisis. But it was interesting that you just had somebody on saying that they're freelancers, right? Because there's a lot of young people who are thinking that they can have this kind of, well, I'll do a bit of work here, a bit of work there. And there's this terrible juggernaut coming up the motorway, which is the Employment Rights Bill. And the Employment Rights Bill is, through its apparent attachment to workers' rights, is going to effectively say that you can't choose anything like 0 hours, and it's going to affect freelancers. Yeah. They're suddenly going to be not allowed to be freelancers. So rather than tackling the real problem, they're avoiding the problem and creating new problems.
Well,
like
because you're going to end up, presumably, if you want to be a freelancer, you're going to have some kind of contract, which you might not want to have.
Exactly. So there's going to be real problems. And in fact, it's quite funny because we just started to discuss it in the House of Lords, and even people who wouldn't normally be opposing the government, like some of the crossbench sort of great and good, but they work in the arts sector, they're saying, oh my God, you're going to attack freelancers. You've got to do something about this. Right. This is going to have a detrimental effect because practically everyone who works in the arts is a freelancer of one sort or another. Right. So there's real problems down the road. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. No, I think that's a very good point worth making, because not many people are talking about this, and I think it's a far more, you know, I know I'm part of the media, but I often think the media chase the wrong dog. You know, they're chasing around after this tariff story, you know, like the stock markets are falling, what an absolute calamity. Well, yeah, but that's what people in the stock markets do. You know, they buy and sell stock. Sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. You know, the way the newspapers look this morning, you'd think there was some kind of, you know, economic collapse on the way. And I mean, the government have already collapsed our economy, so there's not much further it could go, really.
Well, that's, you see, one of the problems with the tariff story. Look, it is a big story. I'm not convinced that Trump's doing the right thing. However, it, to a certain extent, is not something we can act very much on.
No.
You know what I mean? We can just sit here. I mean,
no, we can just watch and wait and see what happens.
Exactly. But as you rightly pointed out, and I've said this myself on other bits of the media, my concern is that the Trump story doesn't become the excuse that Starmer has for problems with the British economy.
Right.
Because actually, until the tariff story, there was already absolute signs of meltdown in relation to decisions that this government has made. And I think the national insurance contribution story still should be headline news.
Yeah.
I mean, it's had a devastating impact on all the sectors, all the small businesses, even on the farmers who are already under the cosh with everything else.
Yeah.
Anyone that employs anyone is now having to spend a fortune on national insurance contribution increases.
Yes.
Let alone the minimum wage stuff and all the rest of it. So we're in a situation where when you say there's all these people who aren't working, the truth is that the workplace is people who would be employing people are now stopping employing people. And as I say, this employment rights bill is going to also put so much onerous responsibility and regulatory garbage and red tape onto small businesses. That'll be even less employment. So I think that I actually know young people who are trying to get jobs, to be fair, because this idea that they're all just sitting there not doing anything is only half the story. When somebody said there's all these jobs in the health service that they should be able to get, it's actually bureaucratic madness to even find the jobs in the health service. So what they should do is actually literally have a kind of new campaign where they go out and they say, these are the 200,000 jobs or whatever it is.
Right.
You know, 1 million jobs that need filling. And if you want one of them, you're to come and turn up at 10 o'clock in the morning and we'll help you get it.
I mean, if
because
it's a job,
they're not doing anything practical to help those young people get the jobs that we know are vacant, right?
But that's the thing, you know, if there are these jobs and the NHS does need saving, and I think we can all agree that it does, because it's not got very many high marks even from the people of this country now. They've completely lost faith in it. You know, the satisfaction survey came out the other day. People just don't trust the NHS anymore. They don't believe that they'll get an appointment with a doctor. They know that they're going to be stuck on a big long waiting list. You know, it's not working. You'd think that would be a crisis management manoeuvre. You'd think for sure, if we need 200,000 more people, let's get them in, you know,
exactly.
and offer some incentive to make people want to go and work there. You know, it makes no sense. Again, I mean, we were talking to a dentist earlier who was saying that, you know, the new dental plan that was introduced by the last government and now by this government isn't working. Nothing's actually changed. Nobody's done anything. They haven't put any more money in. They've told the dentists that they're going to have a different contract, but it hasn't come through. You know, it's all window dressing, isn't it?
I think, you know, you're doing the review of Keir Starmer, you know, 5 years in. Window dressing is a very good way of explaining it, because there's lots of declarations and nothing actually changes.
Right.
And I mean, I know that you could say that of all governments, but I really do feel that the thing that's most irritating about this government is the number of times that they come out and say, this is now going to be the way we solve this problem. And there's been some good statements, you know. Wes Streeting has said some interesting things about the NHS. You know, he's indicated he's prepared to do major reform. But then you have to hold your breath because nothing actually has actively changed on the ground. And one of the problems is that the institutions are so sclerotic and so full of all the nonsense that are holding them back that the government's announcements are not the same as government action. And they tick a box and say, oh, we've done that, we've done that, we've done that. We don't need to think about it anymore. Yeah. So they're far removed from the lives of ordinary people. You know, when they keep saying things like, I mean, I heard some interviews this morning, and it's like, well, we're doing everything for working people. Yeah. We're, you know, they're better off than they were before.
They keep saying it.
Have you ever talked to anyone at all in your life? You are kidding me.
I know.
People are tearing their hair out.
Right. And they keep, I mean, he issues all these sort of platitudes on video these days with sort of rather curious, you know, background music that they put underneath it. You know, talking about how he's fixing this, he's fixing that. And he said the other day that, you know, the migrants, you know, we're getting to grips with the illegal migrants. You're not getting to grips, and there's more of them coming than ever. And there's going to be more of them coming today. It's another nice day today. There's going to be thousands more of them coming between now and the end of the summer. You know, and he goes on about, oh, we've arrested one guy in Amsterdam for having some boat parts. You know, we're absolutely cracking down down on the gangs. It's like, well, you're clearly not cracking down on the gangs. And we've got another story today. We call it Migrant of the Day now. This is a guy, a rapist, who can't be sent back to Jamaica because of concerns over his safety, because apparently his mother gave evidence in a trial for some gangsters in the Caribbean, and he was convicted for murder, this guy. So he's now thought to be in danger if he gets sent back, because he should be deported because he's a sex offender, a serious sex offender, but he doesn't get to go because we have to look after him here.
Well, and what's more, I mean, those stories are now rightly getting the attention they deserve, which is totally bizarre decisions about the lack of deportations of criminals who, in any other period, you would just get into a plane and send them back.
Yeah.
I think that we have got a problem of judicial activism. There's no doubt about it.
No question.
The Sentencing Council has just come out, by the way. You know, the Sentencing Council that's introduced the two-tier sentences and has been in the newspapers, have also, it's now been revealed, are going to have a lesser, basically they've watered down the immigration deportation sentences. So if you get done as a gang leader, you could actually not get sent to prison or get a lesser sentence. That's what their guidance says. And this is a body that was set up by a government, and the government are not dealing with it. So every time they make an announcement, you know that some other bit of government is doing something completely contradictory. And, you know, the story that's most annoyed me of all stories of the week is the fuss that's been made around this series, this Netflix series, Adolescence.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Which, can I just point out that I loved it? I mean, I loved it when I watched it. It's a great series, great drama, well acted, great, right? But that's it. It's a piece of artwork, right? I mean, good. You know, I recommend lots of things on Netflix. I don't want the government to organise its policy around what.
Well, it's like saying, let's make Harry Potter part of the English curriculum. You know, not just because it's a great book, but because, you know, that's what people should be learning about. And you go, well, not really. You encourage people to read, but you don't make it policy.
But they call the summit.
Yeah.
I mean, they call the summit, and then we discover that this great drama, which, by the way, I loved. But now I've got to the point where every time I hear the words, I feel like...
Well, I've deliberately boycotted. I'm not watching it. Because I'm sort of allergic to anything that people do in groups. And as soon as everybody starts liking something, I immediately hate it. I
know. It's a shame because it is good. But anyway, the thing that's really irritating about this summit is they then bring all this charity together. We then discover there's a charity called Tender, who have actually had government money to advise on, you know, crisis of young men and masculinity, the usual, and radicalisation and all that. Yeah. And that they were advising on the drama. They then get called to the summit with the NSPCC and other children's charities. And there's an emergency summit and they're going to roll it out around the schools. It's completely irresponsible because when and if you do watch it, Mike, you'll think, actually, should we be showing this in schools? Yeah. It's not actually very appropriate.
Well, that's right.
I mean, it's got all sorts of things in it, like a psychotherapist asking the young boy all about his sexual preferences and all the rest of it. It's like, oh my God, if anything's going to radicalise him, it's this. And anyway, it was written for adults to understand something about young people. So why would you be showing it to young people? The whole thing is topsy-turvy.
I know, but also, as somebody pointed out to me, you know, Keir Starmer's very happy to have a summit about, you know, a fictional drama, but he's not actually willing to have a summit about the real problem, which is affecting young people in this country, which is all sorts of different things. I mean, I've got this from Paul in Fife, right? He says, I think Netflix should come up with a series which portrays groups of young black men who go around stabbing and hacking each other to death. This could be shown around schools to discourage all young men not to go about stabbing each other. Just an idea, but unlikely to happen. I mean, it would be racist to stereotype people, wouldn't it?
But it's also the case that, I mean, my sort of counter is they should be showing that docudrama Three Girls about the rape gangs, right, which is stunning. They should show that in schools, but I don't want them to show anything in schools. But your point about the summit's well made, because we've just been talking about the real crisis in young people is that they're not going to work. So if you're going to have a summit and you're going to get everyone together and you're going to say we're going to do emergency action, then actually have a summit about that. And then they could act some of our very commonsensical ways of dealing with this as a mass recruitment drive, as we said, for new jobs. They could actually work out something practical. But instead, the headlines have been absolutely consumed with this, we're going to save young people by showing a made-up fictional drama in schools completely inappropriately. And I think that sums up what I think is wrong with the government. the way that they prioritise what matters. It's like when they dealt with after Southport, and their big announcement is, you know, that we're going to ban the sale of knives on Amazon.
Right.
I mean, you want to tear your hair out.
I
You
know.
think, what are you talking about? What on earth makes you think that is the solution? And at every single point, their decision about what is the most important reaction to some of the big stories is the least effective intervention. But they then say, we are acting, we're doing something.
Yeah, we're doing
but
something.
It's always the wrong thing.
It's always the wrong thing. I mean, we're better off piping in morning glory into the schools of this country, and they'd all have a bit more common sense, for heaven's sake. Have a look at this, right? This is Starmer. This is something he tweeted this week about national renewal.
This weekend is 9 months since the general election, since the entire nation voted overwhelmingly for change. Since I stood on the steps of Downing Street and promised that this Labour government would be on the side of working people. With our plan for change, we are turning things around and getting our country back on track.
Well, first of all, they're not turning things around and getting the country back on track. They're taking it further down into the dirt, actually. And also, they did not win by a massive landslide. They had one of the lowest victories and one of the lowest margins of victory, actually, of all time. They got a lot of seats, but they only got about 20% of the vote, didn't they?
They've shown absolutely no humility at all about the fact that that massive majority is actually pretty thin.
Yeah.
They don't seem to understand the contempt and hatred that people feel, not just for them, but for the mainstream parties. I mean, this is not fine to Labour. They actually gained by the absolute disillusion that people have with the Conservative Party, who were terrible when they were in government, particularly in the latter years. And so his self-flattery about that, how popular he is actually shielding him from the reality of the way people feel about what government's doing. And it's on a range of things. I mean, I do think that things like the two-tier sentencing, I think the issues around, you know, people haven't forgotten the fact that there are people in prison as we speak for Facebook posts in relation to the Southport riots, the way that they demonized anybody who showed any sympathy at all with why those riots might have happened. We know that there's a sort of nasty undercurrent of people feeling that they are being, you know, treated with contempt because they're members of the white working class. We know that in a way they've stirred up some of that kind of racial disharmony through continually going on down the road of identity politics. They just haven't got a clue. I mean, as we speak, I mean, they'd say they're on the side of the workers, right? As we speak, there are a group of 8 or 9 nurses called the Darlington nurses who are in court in the tribunal in the northeast against their NHS trust because they simply want, or they're from Darlington, they simply want to get changed in a woman's changing room because they're nurses, right? You have to get changed all the time. They don't want to have a men in there. And because somebody identifies as a man, it's turned into this massive debacle. This is an NHS trust. These are workers. They've had to set up their own union, the Darlington Nurses Union, right? And so much for Starmer saying he's on the side of working people. Actually, ordinary nurses in ordinary hospitals are having to put up with all this absolute ideological claptrap in relation to, for example, gender ideology. Every institution is still drowning in equality, diversity and inclusion policies that threaten people's livelihoods if you say the wrong thing at work. There's endless stories now of people in workplaces being done over and having their free speech undermined because they've tweeted something and then they get the sack from their job, even though they've tweeted in their own time or what have you. So these things are going on, and Starmer has never even reflected on these real, new, genuine problems that are happening to people, ordinary working people.
No, he doesn't. He's not interested. He just sort of shuts his eyes and goes, la, 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 la. That's what he's like. Listen, we went massively over time, I'm afraid. Baroness Claire Fox, brilliant. Thank you so much. Really good to talk to you.